So good afternoon, everyone. I see a huge interest in today's discussion. I'm honored to try and animate those discussions on the roadmap for better and faster hydropower development in Europe. Looking forward to some lively discussions from a very diverse panel we have today. A very good set of industry leaders at the heart of our dynamic and challenging expanding business. Glad to see the interest, lots of friends and colleagues joining us, so not to put our speakers under pressure. Of course, the goal is to assist us all in reaching the 2050 net zero directives with interim goals and finding ways to accelerate that. So let us see how the panel and the speakers who are key stakeholders feel about this. And do we really have to double the park of equipment to reach this goal? Perhaps just a small word on housekeeping. We will be recording this session, and the slide presentations will be shared with all people who are registered. Please put your questions and feel free really to put questions. This is the idea today, that we have an open discussion. Put them in the Q&A box, and publications and useful links will be also published in the chat. So I will try to make it as fluent as possible. And again, it's a huge honor for myself to have such a broad spectrum of leaders in our business. And let's have some thoughts on the roadmap to go forward. In terms of the agenda, we will have Matteo, who is Senior Advisor on IHA, who will give a small introduction to the industry where we stand today. But before that, I would like to introduce you very quickly to our panel, to our speakers today, to the animators. So firstly, I'll start with Janice. Janice Goodenough, CEO of Hydrogrid. Janice has been at the forefront of digitalization within the industry, providing through Hydrogrid a digital platform. This platform is used in over 13 countries. Hydrogrid provides advanced software solution to optimize hydro plant operation, inflow calculations, forecasting, and water management to allow real-time predictive planning. I think something very important going forward in our interesting. Her personal goal is to leverage the digitalization and enhance efficiency to unlock potential previously untapped hydropower potential. We also have with us today Tobias Kettle. He's the CEO of World Hydro, one of the world's leaders in hydropower equipment and services that we all know very well. Voigt is a signatory to the San Jose Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower, promoting a clean, green, modern, affordable solutions. He holds a doctorate in the Technical University in Berlin and a master's in business administration from the École Supérieure in Paris. Very happy to have Tobias with us today on the call. We also have Adrian Lintermut, who is the hydropower policy advisor to EURELEC, the Association of European Power Industries, which represents over 3,500 companies in Europe. He started his academic career in the University of Austria, which he levered after his doctorate degree to contribute to energy infrastructure project in Europe and the Middle East. Adrian is a passionate advocate of hydropower, as we know, and a key driver of the energy transition to achieve the EU Green Deal. As part of the wide spectrum of people we have on the discussion today, we have Ian Robertson. Ian is the head of Statkraft in Scotland, and he's also the interim project director for Lochnacarach Pump Storage Project, which is being developed up in Scotland. He's part of the Statkraft UK development team, working on over 2 gigawatts of projects in the pipeline, not only hydro, which obviously interests us today, but wind, solar, and some hydrogen projects. He has over 25 years experience in the energy business, and he's a former board director of Scottish Renewables. From Portugal, yeah, Albino Marques, who joins us. He's the Institutional Relations Director of REN, the national Portuguese transmission operator. He's also the coordinator, importantly, the coordinator for the European Continental Europe Operations Committee of ENSO, the European Network Transmission System Operators. Earlier in the 2000s, he was also head of the Electricity System Operation Division of ENSO, very experienced in the transmission side of the business. So, at that juncture, I think I will hand back to Matteo, Senior Policy Manager of the IHA, who will give us a small overview of the business in Europe at the moment. If I may, Matteo, ask you to
Yes.
take the floor.
Thank you very much, Brendan, for this introduction, and thank you again to all the speakers who join us here today for these fantastic webinars. So first of all, World Hydropower Outlook 2024. The Outlook is IHA annual publication. This is the second year we publish the Outlook. It's a forward-looking document that really tries to compare and track the hydropower development against the net zero pathway designed by the international energy agencies such as IEA or IRENA. It also reports the latest news of the sector, and we believe it's an essential tool to try to convince policymakers about the need to accelerate the development of sustainable hydropower. Both IEA and IRENA has already made it very clear, in order to achieve a net zero economy, the capacity of hydropower installed globally needs to double up between today and 2050. To achieve this means basically an annual growth of 25 gigawatt per year between now and 2030. And for the following 20 years, the annual development should double up to 50 gigawatt thereafter. It's quite of a challenge ahead. 2023, unfortunately, saw some modest development on a global level. Circa 13.7 gigawatts of hydropower were installed globally, of which actually 6.5 were pumped storage hydropower, which is very, very significant. Circa 2/3 of this capacity was developed in East Asia and Pacific, and China is currently leading the way in this development of hydropower. But let's look about Europe a bit more precisely. This webinar is designed to focus really on the European content of the Outlook and to highlight the key prominent development topics and policies that are today reshaping the energy sector and hydropower operations in Europe. Europe is obviously a continent where hydro is playing a crucial role. 16% of European power is today generated via a combination of different hydropower technologies. On top of that, the continental demand for power is expected to double up by 2050, because we need what we call the deep electrification process of the economies in order to decarbonize actually the European economies. Beside that, the renewable generation is expected to achieve 69% by 2030, according to the latest EU directive. All these together basically describe and avoid any doubt about how important will be hydro in this process, not only to inject additional electron to the power system, but also to provide all that flexibility services that will be needed to integrate these and reshape the power fleet, integrating a lot of variable renewable energies. From a power generation perspective, 2023 was a positive year. In Europe, we saw 637 terawatt-hour being produced, which is a substantial improvement compared with 2022, with only 570 terawatt-hour were produced from hydropower. This is mostly due to a drought period that impacted the operation in Southern Europe in Q1 and Q2 of 2022. The positive signals also come from the market. Despite the low level of deployment, only 596 megawatts were actually added in terms of capacity in Europe, including pumped storage. In 2023, a lot of interesting projects have either been announced, and we'll go through some of them later on, or have progressed to a stage where they're reaching significant milestones into their development process. If we go forward to the next slide, thank you very much. If we look at the capacity added, 399 megawatts out of this almost 600 megawatts added in Europe were located in Turkey, but also some smaller projects were introduced in Austria, Germany, Norway, Finland, and also Italy. As I said, new small projects come online. We can go please forward to the next slide. 20 small projects were commissioned in Norway for a total capacity of circa 90 megawatts, which also included a small PSH project of 6.8 megawatts. I was very interested in reporting this piece of news because I believe it highlights how pumped storage hydropower technologies is feasible and deliverable at any scale. It's quite a scalable technology. It can be delivered from the small megawatt installation up to the multi-gigawatt level that we've seen on a world. Similarly, another interesting project that captured our attention was the Quasolo hydropower plant in Italy, which was financed through a particular system of crowdfunding campaign that involved the local communities, creating a strong bond between the development process of the asset and the communities living around the new power plant. As previously explained, apart from the capacity that was added, several developments are actually providing very positive signals for what could be the development of PSH. Specifically, there's a kind of renaissance of pump storage in Europe, but also hydropower in general for the next few years. In UK, the PSH sector seems to be kind of revitalized by the possible introduction of a cap and floor mechanism. Very unnoticeable project, the Kwachen 2, it's a 600 megawatt PSH expansion on existing facility last year, received the development approval from the local authorities. Similar situation also can be mentioned for the Zero Terrans Poldiski PSH project in Estonia, which was granted the necessary development permits by the government. Austria has also particularly captured our attention in the preparation of this outlook because we've seen several new PSH projects under development in the country. For instance, in 2023, the Ebenzi PSH project began preparatory work, which is a very promising signal, showcasing that probably this project will reach final construction and final entering operation. But also the 70 megawatt Stegenwald hydropower plant started construction during the year. Same also for the Dabar and Morso hydropower plant in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which both began construction work. We move to the next slide. Thank you very much. Spain also was there. Some very interesting development. The Salto de Chiara PSH in Gran Canaria received a grant from the European Union of 90 million, which is very interesting because it shows also how institutions now start understanding how important these assets are for the energy security and to securing a safe and successful energy transition in the continent. So 90 million were granted for this project in Gran Canaria. And the Valdesañas PSH project also received approval from the Spanish government. All these were just examples extracted from the latest development extracted from the Outlook. And the underlying message here is that, yes, from one side, the level of deployment maybe was a bit underwhelming compared with what we have seen the previous year, but at the same time, we've seen a lot of positive development, a lot of positive new piece of news that are indicating that probably over the next few years, we will see an increase of development rate. Some important projects also have been announced during the year. For instance, the Alianguntunturi PSH plant in Finland. It's a 550 megawatt pump storage hydropower project, or the 1.2 gigawatt pump storage project on the Devil River Cascade in Albania. All these are just examples. You will find more downloading the Outlook, which I actually invite everyone to go on our website and download the full publication. 2023, just the last slide, 2023 was not only an interesting year from a development perspective, but also from the introduction and of new policies that are somehow in favor of the development of the sector. European Union was extremely active with two big pieces of policy of regulation that were released between the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024. I'm speaking about the revised Renewable Energy Directive and the Electricity Market Design Reform. I'm not spending too much time at this stage debating this because I'm sure this will be surely covered by Adrian Dindermuth and all our speakers during the rest of the panel discussion. I want also, though, to mention some positive development for the European Technology and Innovation Platform for Hydropower, which in 2023 reached a significant milestone with the announcement of the election, of its first governing board and scientific advisory board. This is a body that is in charge to open a channel of communication between the sector and the European institution. Now, the body, this EDP Hydropower, is in the process of introducing 4 working groups, specifically looking at hydropower flexibility, a second one on biodiversity, climate change mitigation, and a fourth and last one on promotion dissemination of the result of European research and innovation project. I invite everyone to look at the website of EDP Hydropower, and if interested in joining this working. Actions has not only been seen and observed on a European level, but also on a member states, or let's say on a government or national level. Spain was introduced last year 100 million of grant dedicated to early stage of PSH project, and also introduced some clear target for long duration energy storage in their national energy climate plans. Italy introduced a new, discussed with the European Union, received authorization for the introduction of a grant system of 17.7 billion that will be disbursed over a period of 10 years, specifically dedicated to centralized storage system. As mentioned before, and as will be also discussed during the panel discussion, the United Kingdom is in the process of discussing with the sector for the introduction of a possible long duration energy storage cap and floor mechanism. And ultimately, Switzerland has approved a new decree to accelerate and simplify the approval process of 16 hydropower storage power plants that are planned for 2040 with a total, with the goal to increase the energy storage capacity of more than 2 terawatt hours. This is just a summary. As I said before, there is more in the Outlook. I invite everyone to join our hydropower.org/Outlook webpage, or scan the QR code that you hear, download the document, and gather the full insight that we have prepared for you. A last note, we are very proud to announce that IHA is working on the preparation of the version 2.0 of the International Forum on Pumped Storage Hydropower. This time, the forum will take place as a form of a 2 days in-person event in Paris, which is expected to take place in Q3 2025. This will be a huge opportunity to bring together policymakers, the industry, financial institutions, and discuss the future and the potential of these technologies that can be the key to unlock a successful energy transition. Please register using the following QR code that you see on the screen, or even simply drop a message to our membership team at membership@hydropower.org, which will be very happy to respond to any question you might have, and help you also understanding how you can best participate at this crucial event that I'm sure will move forward PSH on a global scale. This is all from my side. I hope I didn't take too much time, because this is really just a short introduction to set the scene. The real quality from this webinar will come now with the discussion and the panel discussion with all our guests. Thank you very much to all. And Brendan, the line, I give you again, the torch is in your hand.
Thank you, Matteo, for passing me back the hot potato. Perhaps just a quick introduction about myself. So Brendan Quigley, I'm the Chief of Operations for International Hydropower and Dams for Brunner Stucki in Lausanne, Switzerland. Specialist in pump storage design, dam raise design, and general hydropower consulting. Perhaps a last point from myself before we get stuck in and flesh out the seeds that Matteo planted. We're very proud to be one of the founding members of IHA, so happy to see that it's growing, and and getting a lot of interest in this much needed business. So what do we want from today's discussion? Basically, we want to flesh out the global trends and the EU market design reforms with the policy developments. We want to have a look at the climate resilient aspects. And basically, we want to look at the lessons learned from recent experiences to see how we can put that in place and improve the future projects, the pipeline of projects, so that we can better and faster develop these projects with the net zero 2050 goals in mind. So perhaps let's get stuck into the meat of the discussion, and firstly put Albino onto a question with respect to the networks. Albino, the Portuguese power system went through a substantial transformation back in 2005. At the time, over 80% of the energy mix was basically fossil fuels, gas, coal, combustion fuels, which accounted for over 15 terawatt hours of power. Today, this picture has really changed with over 35% of the production coming from wind and solar. Perhaps two questions for you. Firstly, can you tell us a little bit about the complexities of this transition, which is introduced into the balancing and management of the network in the Iberian Peninsula? And secondly, if you could add on to that, how could hydropower help in tackling these issues that you see due to this transition in Portugal and Spain?
Thank you very much for the question. Let me thank to IHA the invite. It's always a pleasure to be in these events. And let me start to say that I began my professional career in the 80s exactly in hydropower stations automation. Those times we were starting the digitalization, the first digital relays in the hydropower stations. So I'm also a bit passionate about hydropower. Okay, trying to answer your question. Yes, in the last 20 years, the Portuguese electricity system went to a revolution. It's totally changed. In fact, in 20 years ago, we were starting introducing wind in our system, but we had a lot of coal and a lot of gas in our mix. Now things are totally different, and it has been a challenge to participate and to see how the system evolved. But I think we were successful. Why? Because we could plan a little bit things. So we could, for instance, develop the transmission grid to accommodate the introduction of first the wind, and now we are doing the same to accommodate the solar boom that we are facing in Portugal and also in Spain, as you may know. At the same time, the hydro that always had an important role in Portuguese system. I can tell you that in the 50s, the Portuguese system was practically only hydro. But after that, the fuel came and the hydro continued to be developed. And we also have introduced in our system new hydro and the new pump storage. And the pump storage is key to explain the small number of cases where the system operator had to curtail the wind and solar. Without this pump storage, this was not possible. Anyway, things are changing, and in spring this year, the number of cases of curtailment increased a lot compared with previous years. In my point of view, we need more storage, and we need more storage, which means we need more hydro pump storage. There are some projects being developed in Portugal, but I think we need much more to accommodate a big amount of solar that we will introduce in the following years. So the hydro is key for the flexibility, and the hydro pump storage is key for the TSO be able to balance the system, and I mean not only with upward reserves but also with downward reserves. And downward reserves are key to avoid the curtailment of solar and wind. The hydropower.
Albino, if I could just jump in there on that point. You mentioned quite often equipment is important for the putting in place these ideas of balancing the network, etc., etc. So perhaps on that point, maybe I can bring in Tobias, who would perhaps like to have say a word on that. You have emphasized the importance, Albino, of the flexibility and the role of hydropower, with a significant portion of the European fleet approaching the moment for modernization or rehabilitation. Is flexibility a key driver, Tobias? And secondly, are you observing an increasing demand for flexibility in the projects that you're delivering?
Yes, thanks for the question, Brendan. Both, I would say. I think there's a simple reason for modernization why it's being driven by flexibilization, because simply the plants age much faster. When we typically had in the old regimes of hydropower, you were pumping at night and then you had 3 peaks in a day. That makes 4 load cycles a day. And those go up to 10, 20 and so on. And they flip back and forth between pumping. Sometimes the plant has two units in operation, pumping up, 2 units going down, and 1 in synchronous condenser mode. So they are operated very different, and they were not originally designed for this. So we see a lot of use of lifetime, which is still profitable for our clients, but it brings modernization a little bit faster. And then also with a different twist, and that's the second driving force for modernization through flexibilization from our point of view, then also with different capabilities of the plant. And that depends, of course, a lot on the regulation in the different markets. I think we will touch later a little bit. And I remember well, Albino, when we had discussions with EDP of building the pump storage plants, it was always dependent a little bit on the contract with the REN. What are they being paid for? And then we discussed what kind of capabilities do the power plants need. Sometimes it's more capacity, that they simply are capable with the same storage of providing more capacity in shorter time to the market. We also had a lot of projects going more into flexibility, going more down in part load. Some of the plants are also equipped with variable speed equipment, so we can even be variable in pumping. We also have
basically you are experiencing a wider set of requests for your equipment. Obviously, you're putting a lot of efforts into research and development and developing new equipments to reply to that demand. I think perhaps at that point, I really don't want to cut you in your flow, but I do have to be a bit tough on the timing to be honest. So maybe at that point, I can hand back to Albino. We talked about the Iberian markets. Looking a bit at the broader European situation, is the situation in broader Europe different, firstly? And will the interconnection of various power systems be sufficient, in your opinion, Albino, to integrate the booming development of wind and solar? Or are there other long-term solutions, long duration energy storage? Will that be needed? I think you're on mute, Albino.
Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, I can give you an information that maybe you don't have, that in terms of balancing capabilities, there is a correlation between the amount of hydro in each control area in each country and the ability to balance the system quickly. So the best countries that recover the balance in less than 15 minutes, that's the TSO job, are exactly the countries where the hydro has an important share. Countries like Swiss, Austria, Norway, Spain, and Portugal the best ones in Europe to recover the balance. So this says a lot about the importance of hydro in the ability of balancing the systems. But the answer about the interconnections are clearly no. The interconnections are important to increase the capacity of the cross-border trades, to avoid market splitting and saving money to the consumers. But they are not enough to solve the needs for mass integration of wind and solar. So each country, each control area, as we call it in N2E, must take care of its own security of supply, because crises can happen simultaneously. And we can, of course, share reserves, and we are starting putting in operation projects in Europe where we share reserves, cross-border sharing. But anyway, each control area must have its own reserves, so each control area must have flexibility in its own country, and the hydro is, of course, the most valuable asset that the TSO can have to balance the system.
Okay, you talked about cross-border reserves, forecasting, and such things, and having a confidence in that amount of energy available. Perhaps at that juncture, I can ask Janice to say a word. We're talking about flexibility of provision. Janice, from your experience, are European electricity markets capable of incentivizing and remunerating this flexibility and reserve?
So I would say I have two positive developments and maybe one more thing that we are missing. So the positive developments are that, first of all, the day-ahead market, where roughly 80% of all power is being traded, has seen a significant increase in volatility over the last 5 or 6 years. This has led to an increase in remuneration for flexible power plants, such that the difference in revenue that you can generate from an unflexible run-of-river power plant in comparison to a flexible, so not pump storage, but just flexible storage power plant, has increased from roughly 15%, where it was 5, 6, 7 years ago, to now being up to 50%. So in that sense, yes, the market is rewarding flexibility, and that reward has gone up. The second, I think, good piece of information for flexible producers is that also on the specific flexibility markets, so here I'm talking about primary, secondary, tertiary reserve. In some markets, they're also called minute reserve, MFRR or AFRR. Here we have seen a liberalization across all of Europe. And in most countries in Europe, also the minimum volumes that you have to have in order to participate in those markets have gone down. So in most countries across Europe, these minimum volumes are down to 1 or 5 megawatt, which means almost all hydropower producers would be able to participate in those markets if they have the technical flexibility. And this is a second way in which the market very directly incentivizes flexibility. The one piece that we are still missing, in my opinion, is something like a tertiary reserve, right? So a kind of capacity for longer term duration storage, which we have touched on before. There are some thoughts in the direction of replacement reserves. So here I'm talking about anything that has more than an hour time to ramp up. So we're talking hours, days, the kind of flexibility that you would need to cover for the so-called, as we call it in German beautifully, Dunkelflaute or dark lull, meaning days and weeks where you need additional flexibility. And this is still an unsolved problem in market design.
Okay, so Janice, I think good news from you, but still a few things to do, a few things to put in place in terms of guidelines and policy. Perhaps it's a good juncture to ask Adrian to jump into that discussion. Adrian, if I can just prompt you with a question in that direction. The latest European Union Parliament and Commission have been particularly active in producing new policies focused on the energy sector, as Janice was explaining. The last one was the electricity market design reform. Perhaps you could give us some insight as to what are the key elements of this critical piece of reform, and that may impact the hydropower sector.
Sure. So before answering your question, I would like to take a step back and provide some words on the bigger picture, because it's important. As Yannis mentioned, the market is more or less able to deliver remuneration. This review was initially not foreseen by the European Commission. Policymakers were forced to take measures because of the war in the Ukraine, if you remember, and the unprecedented electricity price crisis that were triggered because of this war. So what was the main issue behind it, and what was also the concerns from your electric perspective? When this discussion started, there have been some calls from member states to really fundamentally rethink the electricity market design. Fortunately, from today's perspective, these ideas did not get sufficient support. And what I can share with you is that the general rules of the European electricity market design remained more or less untouched. Nonetheless, there are three important elements that I would like to share with you that affect hydropower. The first thing that has been introduced was the simplified access to power purchase agreements, PPAs. Power purchase agreement is a long-term contract between two private parties based on a fixed price. And if you agree on a fixed price, obviously, this reduces the risk of price volatility for the off-taker, for the consumers. Important, this was introduced for all technologies. The second point refers to variable technologies, variable generation, like wind, solar, but also to hydropower without reservoir. So hydropower without reservoir is not the usual definition, but this stems from the taxonomy regulation. And it describes those kind of plants that are primarily determined, or the generation of these plants is primarily determined by natural conditions like the weather, and not by market signals. So for these variable technologies in the future, the only direct price support scheme permissible is or are two-sided CFDs. What does this mean in practice? If I'm a hydro operator and I would like to get price subsidies, I can agree with a public entity on a contract which is based on a floor and a cap mechanism. So if my earnings are below the floor, I get a compensation from this public entity. When my revenues are above, I need to pay the difference off. And the third and last point I'd like to highlight directs or affects flexible assets. So member states will be required to do a proper flexibility need assessment on a regular basis to really have a good picture what flexibility is needed in terms of time frame and so on. And then member states can decide if the market signals are sufficient to drive the necessary expansion, or if these signals are not available or not sufficient, they can introduce flexibility support schemes like capacity mechanisms. So just as a summary, PPAs for all technologies, for the variable ones, the two-sided CFD, and for the flexible ones, potential capacity mechanisms or similar measures.
Right. It's again going in the right direction. You mentioned, Adrian, the member states. Perhaps if I could just bounce it back to Albino in his role with ENSO. Albino, do you have any updates from REN or from ENSO perspective on this flexibility assessment that member states will need to carry out? That was mentioned earlier by Adrian.
Yeah, of course. ENSOE is already started working in a common European TSO study of future flexibility requirements and needs. In fact, the European legislation does not give that mandate to ENSOE, so it's the member states that have to fulfill the study. But anyway, ENSOE has already started to do it. This study will use the TYNDP scenarios, that is the Transmission Network Development Plan, and will be also coherent with the ENSOE reports about security of supply, adequacy risk assessments, must include reserve availability. because electricity systems cannot be operated without different type of reserves. So long-term and short-term flexibility will be taken in consideration. Long-term is key for security of supply, and short-term is key for balancing. In case of Portugal, REN also started an internal study about flexibility needs to be prepared to help the Portuguese authorities when they will do this job, this legal mandate.
Right. I think it's probably a good time. Thanks for that insight, Albino. We've talked about forecasting, we've talked about transmission, a little bit of policy. We've touched very, very briefly on the financial aspects, which obviously is the hot topic on everyone's lips, and maybe we'll get some more feedback on that later. So, Ian, just to put you on the spotlight a little bit, from a developer's point of view, in the World Hydropower Outlook 2024, the IHA speaks about a resurgence of pump storage in Europe, which is great. Statkraft is currently involved in the development of Loch na Carrach in Scotland, a pump storage project. Maybe you could just give us some insights as the status of this project and what are really the key drivers supporting this massive effort and investment.
Thanks very much, Brendan. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I'm the development project director for Loch na Carrach PSH. It's a really exciting project because it's going to use the globally iconic Loch Ness as the lower reservoir. It's getting lots of attention. There hasn't been a pump storage project built in Scotland for over 50 years, or in the UK, the wider UK, for 40 years. So there is this resurgence right now. There's probably a double-figure number of projects in the UK pipeline now for pump storage hydro. And Loch na Carrach is well placed within that pipeline to become operational, possibly first of all, in terms of its journey down the development cycle. It's an investment in the order of, €1 billion or thereabouts. We acquired the project last December. It already had a planning consent in place from the Scottish Government, which the previous developer had got in 2021, and a grid connection offer as well for 450 megawatts of pump storage. So the current state is that we're working with the local planning authority to discharge the 42 planning conditions that the project had. That's going to take a bit of time. We've completed, or we're shortly to complete our geotechnical site investigations. We're working now with our design consultant to optimize the design, hoping to increase the power output to 500 megawatts and 8 hours of storage. We're in the procurement process for the electromechanical and civils contracts as well. And we are continually involved in local and national stakeholder engagement, and that's everything from small local contractors in the supply chain and service providers right through to energy ministers in both the Scottish and UK governments. So in terms of the drivers for this project, Statkraft, as you may know, is fundamentally a hydropower company. We're the largest in Europe, so we are as well qualified as anyone to deliver such a project. The UK, of course, needs pump storage, new pump storage hydro in order to support its 2030 decarbonisation targets, as we've already heard about across Europe. And that includes a vast increase in wind and solar, which Statkraft is also helping to deliver from our wider pipeline. So it is a complementary project for us. And we also develop battery storage and grid stability projects as well. And then, of course, there's a policy environment. There are supportive policy indicators, and we'll talk shortly about the proposed long-duration energy storage cap and floor scheme, which is needed to secure the investment. And we're waiting for an update on the UK government on that. And hoping to be one of the early successful schemes in such a program. And of course, in Statkraft, being an international company, we compete for investment with different technologies and across different Statkraft regions and countries. So the UK's got a strong pipeline and a good environment for investment.
I think, Ian, on that investment side, it's really encouraging what you're doing in Scotland, and there's a lot of things happening in Scotland, and you obviously seem to be advancing the scheme, your project, really on a fast track way, and congratulations on that. But you mentioned technology advancements, and you also touched on your advancement on planning conditions and such things. Perhaps I could bring in just Adrian and Tobias as a bit of a duo on that on the next set of questions, and to pick up on what Ian was saying. So, in your opinion, what is it, despite the fact that Ian and Statkraft seem to be moving on quite well, what is missing to facilitate the advancement of pump storage projects and of other types of flexible hydropower in Europe? Maybe if I could ask Adrian and Tobias to do a bit of a double act on that one for a few minutes.
Yes, sure. I'd like to approach this question from the communication, so from the policy perspective. I think what is key, and this is the first task I'm proposing to us as the sector, is to align our communication and our messaging. Compared to solar, wind, hydropower is much more complex, and we still have the issue, if I talk to people in Brussels, that the majority does not have an understanding of hydropower, of the different hydropower plant types and the services they provide in the energy transition. So if we really want to get the necessary societal and political support, I think we need to increase our efforts in this regard. And at Eurelectric, we have started this exercise. We have published hydropower short stories, the narrative, but there is much more needed. The second task, I think, is directed towards member states. There is plenty of new regulation on the table, which was adopted on the EU level, but now it's really up to member states to swiftly and comprehensively, I know this is not an easy task, implement these new provisions, because Matteo mentioned it earlier in his introduction, Renewable Energy Directive. There we have accelerated procedures for renewable and storage facilities. We have the presumption of overriding public interest. Also the new provision when it comes to the market. So yeah, plenty of work for the member states. And the third task I would like to allocate to the European Commission to recognize the benefits of hydropower. And here it's again up to us, because we need, as a sector, engage with the relevant people. I've heard some rumors that the new commission will have a focus on flexibility and storage, but it's important that we engage with these people, that we share best practice, that we share experience, but also our concerns. So to ensure at the end that if the commission publishes an initiative, hydropower is properly acknowledged in these documents.
Perhaps Tobias, you want to add something to Adrian's comments from your side as a manufacturer, as a service provider?
I mean, obviously, I don't have a direct opinion. More, I can cite our customers, and what I distill from the discussions, actually, even on a global level, is most important is a long-term, reliable income stream. So I think we need a regulation where people can build on and build their revenue streams. The beauty on hydropower is usually you don't have any fuel costs. The capex is, I mean, at some point at least, it's relatively nicely plannable and capital costs as well. But the difficult piece is the PPA or something else where you can base your revenue on. And I think, you know, we also had a discussion in the German Ministry of Economy and Energy the other day, and all of those supports and capex and tax cuts and so on, they are all nice, but if you cannot calculate your return for the next 20 years, it all gets a little difficult to make it bankable. Right. So that's my takeaway. And I mean, probably the most obvious would be a more harmonized European regulation and a little bit simpler. But that's probably more wishful thinking than practical.
A bit ambitious, but that's why we're here today, to put those seeds and plant them in the European Commission and the UK government's heads to ensure that we reach these goals that everyone has set and that have to be put in place. So maybe again, you touched on, Tobias, income streams, PPAs, such things. So I will put Ian a little bit back on the spotlight. We're moving into the sort of the nitty-gritty finance end. Ian, the storage technologies are of course, will play a vital role in decarbonisation of the European and the UK electric power systems. Nonetheless, this is a new role for which electricity markets were not originally designed. A couple of things on that. Do you think that these existing markets can provide the revenue visibility needed to develop large infrastructure such as pump storage projects? And secondly, rather quickly, what is your take on the cap and floor mechanism, which has been cited earlier? Just to be clear, perhaps in Europe, continental Europe, not really familiar with that term, but certainly it's a UK government thing. So if you could give us a couple of insights onto that quickly, and let's try to move on.
Yeah, well, first of all, the market as it currently exists is not enough to see pump storage projects coming forward, which is why the long duration energy storage scheme in the form of an expected cap and floor is necessary. But I mean, here in the UK, there are a number of markets that we can participate in that exist already. You know, the balancing mechanism, the capacity market, ancillary services, day-ahead and intraday trading, and so on. Because of the changes that in the market that Janice has already mentioned. And we already know that pump storage projects today are operating very differently to the original schemes, cycling much more often and so on due to the increased levels of variable generation on the system. But to talk about the cap and floor scheme, this has already been tried used in the UK for interconnectors. That was introduced in 2010, and currently the GB market has 10 gigawatts of operational capacity under that scheme, with a further 8 or 9 gigawatts in the pipeline as well. So that a cap and floor scheme is tried and tested in that type of environment. The similarities between pump storage, hydro, and interconnectors are along the lines of very high capital costs with a need for revenue certainty. Corporate and project finance options available. You can set availability and performance targets and so on, and a clear process for assessment being needed. But there are differences, of course, as well. Interconnectors don't themselves, trade. So the pump storage schemes will compete in various energy markets, as I've already mentioned. They will also need an incentive to operate above the cap of a cap and floor as well, to sort of maintain their basic service. And I know that the government is very keen to avoid gaming of the system, so that's maybe a tricky one for them. And for it to be effective, the cost and revenues have to be.
You're saying, Ian, that incentives are still needed to be put in place, and there's still.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd hoped by the time of this webinar that we would have the latest information from the UK government. They consulted on the cap and floor scheme at the start of this year, closed in March, and we're now waiting for the government's response to that. And as the audience might know, the UK government has recently changed. There was a change of government in July, which may have slowed things down. But we in the whole industry here is asking for clarity as soon as possible to build investor confidence and to follow that template set by the interconnector scheme. So we're waiting that is hopefully days or weeks away at the moment. Because, as I say, we're spending all our DevEx at the moment in preparation for the expectation of being able to bid into an auction.
So you're sticking your neck out a wee bit in a certain way, and
yeah,
perhaps we've talked a lot, Ian, about UK, Europe. Of course, this is our comfort zone. This is where we live and work. Perhaps maybe Janice, if you could, you have a vision a little bit more global. From hydrogrid perspective, you're a company focused on digitalization of the hydropower plant operation, and is active on, as you said, as I said earlier, on 13 countries and several continents. Maybe I could ask you, what is the benefits that digitalization process can bring to the European hydropower fleet, especially in the context of the evolving landscape? Then I'll just, after you have a quick reply to that, I'll bring back Ian again, and I don't like to cut Ian because there's lots of interesting things to say, as all of you, and I'll bring back Ian for a small comment at the end. So Janice, if you would like to give us your take on the more global picture.
Yes, so from our perspective, we have clients and users in 13 countries across 3 continents. The good news from a European perspective is that as an average, I would say the digitalization level in Europe is higher than it is in most other parts of the world. But globally speaking, as also Tobias touched on before, 40% of the global hydro fleet is more than 40 years old. So these are power plants that come from a time before the internet and certainly before digitalization. So there's a lot of investment need there in the hardware, but also in the software. When I speak of digitalization, I refer to basic things like SCADA system capabilities to, remote connect.
I think, Janet, if I could, sorry, just interrupt you, and perhaps I don't have time really, maybe for Ian's last word, because I want to reply to a question from the audience, which has come in before we wrap up. One question is, and perhaps Ian can answer this one. What about the hydro workforce in Europe in the coming years? Europe, UK. Do you see a potential shortage in this issue as it has been seen in North America?
Yes, absolutely. There was a question there which I've answered in the chat as well about the supply chain in the Scottish Highlands in particular, but I guess it is a wider issue. At least we've got sight of this pipeline, we can take some action and some steps. Mm-hmm. And we are, for our part, we're doing work with academia and research providers and so on to try and get our forecasts correct as well. And we're working with the supply chain at the local level, and of course,
I guess
as well.
I guess from the global perspective, it's fantastic to have this new energy in the hydro business, but it's been a little bit sleeping for a while, and we need to bring in skills and develop new skills across the board. Perhaps if I could just again wrap up a little bit now. I'm sorry to have to be the bad guy and cut all these nice discussions. One of the takeaways, and I think it was Adrian said it, that a lot of the regulations have been adopted, but the member states have to put them in place. I think that's really one of the takeaways that's important from my perspective. And let us think in that one. Also, perhaps we have a few moments still to go, and I would like to open the floor to my friends and colleagues who have been answering and on the spotlight. Would you like to pick up on any of the points, maybe even some of the points made by the other friends on the discussion, that you would like to really emphasize and wrap up, that you really have taken as a takeaway, that the audience can have in their mind going forward as they run back to their emails and their busy lives?
If I may, very short or very briefly, Eurelectric, we are currently working on a study with Compass Lexicon to assess the missing money to realize all these flexible assets, and we will have a focus also on pump storage. So this study will be published soon, and for sure will provide additional material to this exchange.
Right. I think on that point, then, I think we can wrap up the discussion for today. It's very tough to keep all these interesting discussions under control and to keep you to timing, which is not really very comfortable. But I'd really like to thank you all, and again, Matteo, for organizing it, and all the speakers today. Really valuable insights from a broad sector of our hydropower community. On that point, I just encourage you all to support this sort of webinar, these sort of discussions, and really feel free to propose topics in the future. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. It was a huge pleasure for myself, and I hope I managed to animate it as well as I could. So thank you, and have a nice afternoon, or a nice morning, nice evening to everyone, and please keep pushing on the hydropower market. We need it very much. So thank you again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.